The shuttle shook hard as it docked with the station, and Yuna grabbed the edge of her seat with both hands. Her knuckles turned white. Through the small window, she could see the massive ring of Lior 6 stretching out in every direction, silver and glowing against the black of space. It was the biggest thing she had ever seen. Somewhere inside that station, thousands of alien students were already living, studying, and training together. And now she was supposed to join them. She did not feel ready. Dohwan sat next to her, his long legs folded awkwardly in the small seat. He looked out the same window and let out a slow whistle. "That's big," he said. "That's really, really big." Yuna nodded, but said nothing. Her stomach was tight. She had barely eaten that morning, and the shuttle ride from Earth had taken 11 hours through a series of jump gates that made her feel like her bones were being pulled apart and put back together. She pressed her hand against her chest and took a slow breath. Behind them, Unji leaned forward between their seats. "Stop looking so scared, both of you," she said. "We trained for 2 years to get here. We passed every test. We earned this." "I know," Yuna said quietly. "I just want to do well." Unji squeezed her shoulder. "You will." The shuttle doors opened, and the human students stepped out onto the arrival platform. There were 12 of them in total, the first cohort of humans ever admitted to the Galactic Unity Academy. They stood in a small group, wearing matching gray uniforms that looked plain and dull compared to the colorful clothing of the alien students who walked past them in every direction. And the aliens were everywhere. Tall ones, short ones, ones with 4 arms, ones with skin like polished stone, ones that floated slightly above the ground. Yuna tried not to stare. She kept her eyes forward and followed the signs toward the registration hall. That was where she first saw Velith. He was standing near the entrance with a group of Orani students. The Orani were tall and graceful, with smooth pale skin and large dark eyes. They came from a Class 2 world, a planet so gentle and safe that their biggest natural predator was something the size of a house cat. Velith was the tallest of them, and he carried himself like someone who had never once in his life been told no. He noticed the humans immediately. His dark eyes moved over them with open curiosity, and then his lips curled into something that was not quite a smile. "So these are the Deathworlders," he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. His voice was smooth and musical, the way all Orani voices were. I expected something more impressive. A few alien students nearby laughed. She did not look at him. But Velith was not finished. He stepped forward and blocked her path directly. He was nearly a full meter taller than her, and he looked down at her with an expression of amused disbelief. "This one," he said to his friends, "this is what a Class 12 Deathworld produces. She looks like she would break if I breathed on her." More laughter. Yuna felt heat rising in her face. She kept her eyes on the floor. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I need to get to registration." Velith stepped aside with a dramatic sweep of his arm, like he was granting a great favor. "Of course, little thing. Try not to get lost." Dowan's jaw was tight as they walked away. "I'm going to hit him," he muttered. "Don't," Yuna said. "Please, it's fine." It was not fine, but she had learned a long time ago that reacting only made things worse. The first week was hard. The academy was enormous and confusing. The classes were taught in Galactic Common, which Yuna could speak, but not perfectly, and the other students treated the humans like a curiosity at best and a joke at worst. The word Deathworlder followed them everywhere, spoken sometimes with fear, but mostly with mockery. The aliens could not understand how creatures from the most dangerous planet classification could look so ordinary, so soft, so small. Yuna tried to be invisible. She sat in the back of every class. She ate quickly in the dining hall and left before anyone could bother her. She was polite to everyone, even the ones who were not polite back. It did not help. Velith had decided she was his favorite target. Maybe it was because she was the smallest of the humans. Maybe it was because she never fought back. Whatever the reason, he made her life miserable. He mocked her answers in class. He made jokes about her size in the dining hall. He called her the gravity-crushed runt, and the name stuck. Soon half the station was using it. His enforcer was worse. Dren was a Kothi, a species built like a boulder, with 4 thick arms and a face like cracked stone. He did the physical work that Velith was too elegant to do himself. A shove in the corridor here, a knocked-over tray there. Once, he stepped on Yuna's datapad and cracked the screen, then told her she should not leave her things on the floor. Yuna said nothing. She picked up the broken pad and walked away. Dohan wanted to report it. Inji wanted to confront Velith publicly. Teho, a senior human student who had been at the academy for 2 years already, told them all to be careful. Velith's family has connections on the academy council, he said. If you make trouble, they will find a way to send you home. That is how it works here. So Yuna endured. She went to class. She studied. She kept her head down. At night, when the dormitory was dark and quiet, she sat on the edge of her bed and looked at her hands. They were small hands, thin fingers, short nails. They did not look dangerous at all. She closed them into fists and held them there until her knuckles ached. Not yet, she whispered to herself. Not yet. 3 weeks into the term, a message appeared on every student's terminal. A mandatory survival evaluation had been scheduled. All first-year students would be transported to the wild moon of Reth 4 for a 72-hour field assessment. Teams would be assigned randomly. Performance would be graded. Failure was possible. In the briefing hall, Yuna read the details on the screen. Dense forests, predatory animals, unpredictable weather, toxic plant life. Every alien student around her looked nervous. Some looked terrified. Then she read it a 3rd time. Across the hall, Velith caught her eye and smirked. The same arrogant expression he always wore. But this time, Yuna did not look away. She held his gaze, steady and calm, and something behind her eyes shifted. It was small. It was quiet. But it was there. Velith's smirk faltered, just for a second, and he looked away first. Yuna turned back to the screen. Her heart was beating hard, but her hands were perfectly still. She had grown up on Earth. She knew what a wild moon was. The drop pod hit the ground hard enough to rattle Yuna's teeth. The door blew open, and hot, wet air rushed in like a wall. Outside, the moon of Reth 4 was a mess of green and brown and gray. Thick trees with twisted trunks rose up in every direction. The sky was a strange orange color, heavy with clouds that looked like they were boiling. Something screamed in the distance, a long, high-pitched animal cry that echoed through the forest and faded into nothing. The 4 aliens in the pod with Yuna were frozen in place. Velith stood near the door, his tall frame stiff, his dark eyes moving rapidly across the tree line. Dren was behind him, all 4 of his massive arms pressed against the walls of the pod like he was trying to hold it together. The other 2, a thin Pelhari student named Girath and a small winged Tessic called Omil, were pressed into the back corner, barely breathing. Yuna stepped past all of them and walked outside. The ground was soft and uneven. She crouched down and pressed her fingers into the soil. Wet, warm, slightly acidic based on the smell. She looked up at the trees, at the way the branches grew, at the direction of the moss on the bark. Then she turned her face to the sky and felt the wind against her skin. It was shifting, changing direction, getting cooler. Storm coming, she said. Maybe 2 hours. We need shelter before it hits. Nobody moved. They were all staring at her. "Now," Yuna said, and something in her voice made them move. She did not wait for Velith to take charge. There was no time for politics on a wild moon. She pointed at the base of a massive fallen tree, about 30 meters from the drop zone. Its root system had pulled up a wall of earth when it fell, creating a natural windbreak. She told Dren to drag the largest branches he could find to build a lean-to against the root wall. She told Girath to collect broad leaves from the lower canopy for waterproofing. She told O'Meal to use her wings to scout the immediate area from above and report anything moving. Velith stood with his arms crossed. "I did not agree to take orders from you," he said. Yuna looked at him. She did not raise her voice. "Then sit down and stay out of the way," she said. "I do not have time to argue." She turned her back on him and started working. The shelter took her less than 20 minutes. She built it the way her survival instructor on Earth had taught her, with a sloped roof to shed rain, a raised sleeping platform to keep them off the wet ground, and a fire pit positioned so the smoke would drift away from the entrance. She stripped bark, split wood, wove branches together with vines. Her hands moved fast and sure. She had done this before, many times. On Earth, every child learned basic survival skills in school. Not because it was fun, but because Earth was a planet that would kill you if you forgot what you were. Earthquakes, floods, wildfires, predators, venomous insects, temperature swings of 40 degrees in a single day. Humans lived on a world where everything, from the weather to the wildlife to the bacteria in the water, was trying to end them. And they had survived, not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they were stubborn, adaptable, and absolutely refused to die. Yuna was all of those things. The storm hit an hour and 40 minutes after they landed. It was violent, sheets of rain, driven sideways by wind that bent the trees like grass. Lightning split the orange sky in white cracks. The temperature dropped fast. The aliens huddled inside the shelter, shaking. Even Dren, with his stone-hard skin, looked miserable. Yuna sat at the entrance and watched the storm. She had seen worse. She had camped through a typhoon once during training in Jeju. This was loud, but it was manageable. When the rain eased, she went out to find water. She followed a set of animal tracks, downhill, to a narrow stream. She tested the water by smell, then by touch, then by tasting a single drop on the tip of her tongue. Slightly metallic, but no bitterness, no chemical burn. Safe enough. She filled the emergency containers and carried them back. On the way, she found edible roots. She knew they were edible because they grew in patterns similar to wild yams on Earth, clustered near water sources with broad leaves that caught sunlight. She dug them up with her bare hands, cleaned them, and brought them back to camp. The aliens watched her cook. None of them had ever prepared food from raw ingredients. On their worlds, food came from machines, pre-processed and safe. The idea of pulling something from the dirt and eating it was alien to them, in the most literal sense. Night came fast. Reth 4 had a short day cycle, barely 14 hours, and when the sun dropped below the horizon, the darkness was absolute. The forest came alive with sounds, clicking, rustling, low growls that vibrated in the chest. Gireth whimpered. O'Meal tucked her wings tight against her body. Dren sat with all 4 fists clenched. Velith looked at Yuna. For the first time since she had known him, there was no arrogance in his eyes, just fear. Yuna fed the fire. She kept it bright. Fire was a human invention, one of the oldest, and it was still the best defense against the dark. She sat with her back straight and her ears open, listening to every sound, sorting them automatically. That rustle was small, herbivore, no threat. That clicking was insect. Ignore it. That low breathing sound from the northeast was something bigger. She picked up the sharpened stick she had made earlier and stood. The creature came out of the tree line slowly, It was about the size of a large wolf, low to the ground, with 6 legs and a jaw that split into 3 sections when it opened its mouth. Its eyes reflected the firelight in bright green. It was a predator, a real one, and it was testing them, moving closer to see if they would run. Behind Yuna, Dren made a strangled sound. Omil closed her eyes. Velith backed up until he hit the shelter wall. Yuna walked forward. She planted her feet wide. She raised the stick above her head. She filled her lungs with air, and then she screamed. It was not a scream of fear. It was not a cry for help. It was something older and deeper. Something that came from a place inside her that was connected to 100,000 years of human survival. It was the sound of a creature that had looked death in the face every single day of its evolutionary history and had said no. It ripped through the forest like thunder and sent birds scattering from the canopy 100 meters away. The predator flinched, its ears flattened, its 6 legs tensed. It looked at this small, loud, terrifying thing standing between it and the fire, and it made a decision. It turned and vanished into the dark. Yuna lowered the stick. Her hands were trembling slightly. She turned back to the fire and sat down. The 4 aliens stared at her like they had never seen her before, because in a very real way, they had not. On Earth, Yuna said quietly, poking the fire with her stick. That would not even be in the top 10 most dangerous things in my backyard. Nobody laughed. Nobody spoke. The rest of the 72 hours followed the same pattern. Yuna led. She hunted. She foraged. She navigated. She found fresh water 3 more times. She built traps for small animals and cooked the meat over the fire. She treated a gash on Girith's arm with a poultice made from crushed leaves that had natural antiseptic properties. On the 2nd night, Dren fell into a toxic bog. The mud was thick and acidic, burning his skin where it touched. He thrashed and sank deeper. The others stood at the edge, too afraid to go in. Yuna went in. She waded through the burning muck up to her waist, grabbed Dren by 2 of his forearms, and pulled. He was 3 times her weight. Her boots sank into the mud. Her muscles screamed. Her skin burned where the acid touched it. She pulled harder. She growled through her teeth and dragged him out inch by inch until they were both on solid ground, covered in mud and gasping. Dren lay on his back, all 4 arms spread wide, staring at the sky. He turned his head and looked at Yuna, this tiny human girl who had just hauled his massive body out of death with nothing but her bare hands. "Thank you," he said. It was the first kind thing he had ever said to her. Yuna nodded. She poured clean water over her burns and wrapped them with strips torn from her own uniform. Then she went back to the fire and sat down for watch duty. She did not sleep that night or the night before. 48 hours awake, running on nothing but willpower and the endurance that Earth had beaten into her species over millions of years. When the retrieval shuttle finally arrived on the 3rd day, Yuna walked her group to the landing zone. All 5 of them were alive. All 5 of them were intact. Back on Lior 6, Instructor Moraf sat in his office and reviewed the survival footage from Yuna's group. His 4 eyes moved across the screen in silence. He watched her build the shelter. He watched her find water. He watched her drive off the predator. He watched her drag Dren from the bog. He replayed the scream 3 times. Then he leaned back in his chair and pressed 2 of his hands against his face. His translator was not designed for the word he whispered, but the closest galactic common equivalent was something like dread mixed with wonder. "What are these creatures?" he said to the empty room. Nobody answered. But somewhere on the station, Yuna was sitting in the medical bay, getting her acid burns treated, and she was smiling. Not because she was proud, not because she wanted recognition, because for 72 hours, She had not been the quiet girl who got pushed around. She had been exactly what Earth made her. Word spread through the station like fire through dry grass. By the time Yuna woke up the morning after her return, every student on Leor 6 had seen at least a clip from the survival footage. The scream, the predator retreating, the tiny human girl dragging a four-armed Kathi out of a toxic bog with nothing but raw strength and stubbornness. The clips were being shared on every social feed across the station network, and the comments were split between amazement and disbelief. Yuna did not look at the comments. She got dressed, went to the dining hall, sat in her usual corner, and ate her breakfast in silence. Dohan dropped into the seat across from her with a grin so wide it looked like it might split his face. "You are famous," he said, "like actually famous. I have had 6 different aliens ask me if it is true that humans can survive without sleep for 3 days. 2 days, Yuna corrected him quietly. I slept a little on the shuttle back. Unji sat down next to Dohwan and slid her datapad across the table. On the screen was Yuna's survival evaluation score. It was the highest in the entire first-year cohort, by a significant margin. "Look at that," Unji said. "Highest score, not just among humans, among everyone." Yuna looked at the number, then pushed the pad back. "It does not matter," she said. "It matters," Unji said firmly. "It matters a lot." Yuna shook her head and went back to eating. She did not want attention, she did not want fame. She wanted to finish her education, earn her place in the galactic community, and go home knowing she had done something worthwhile. That was all. But the galaxy did not care what Yuna wanted. Later that day, Teho found her in the library. He was a third-year student, calm and steady, with the kind of quiet confidence that came from 2 years of surviving the Academy's politics. He sat down across from her and studied her face for a moment before speaking. "You did something remarkable down there," he said. "You know that, right?" "I did what anyone from Earth would have done," Yuna said. "That is exactly my point." Teho leaned forward. "You keep shrinking yourself. You keep making yourself small so that they feel comfortable around you. But you do not owe them your smallness, Yuna. You never did." She looked at him. She wanted to argue, to say that being quiet was not the same as being small, but the words would not come, because she knew he was right. Teho stood up. "Just think about it," he said, and left. Yuna thought about it. She thought about it all day. But whatever peace the survival evaluation might have brought her, Velith was determined to destroy it. He could not accept what had happened on Reth 4. He could not accept that the creature he had spent weeks mocking and pushing around had saved his life. The humiliation was unbearable, and instead of learning from it, he chose to twist it into something ugly. 3 days after their return, Velith filed a formal complaint with the Academy Council. In it, he claimed that Yuna had exhibited unauthorized aggressive behavior during the survival evaluation. He said she had threatened the group with violence. He said she had used dangerous Deathworld instincts that put everyone at risk. He said her scream had been a deliberate attempt to intimidate her teammates. He requested her immediate expulsion. The complaint was taken seriously. Velith's family had connections on the council, deep ones, and when a disciplinary hearing was scheduled for the following week, nobody was surprised. The system worked the way it always worked. Power protected power. Yuna received the summons on her terminal that evening. She read it twice, then closed the screen and sat on her bed in the dark. Dowan found her there an hour later. He sat next to her, without speaking, and they stayed like that for a long time. "I saved his life," Yuna finally said. Her voice was very small. "I saved all of them." "I know," Dohan said, "and he wants to send me home for it." "I know." Yuna pressed her hands against her eyes. She did not cry. She had taught herself not to cry a long time ago. Not because crying was weakness, but because on Earth, Tears blurred your vision, and blurred vision got you killed. The hearing was held in a cold white room on the administrative level of the station. Yuna stood alone at the center of the floor. Above her, the council members sat in a curved row, 7 aliens from 7 different species, all of them old, all of them powerful. Velith sat to one side with a legal advisor from his homeworld. He looked calm and composed, like a man who had already won. Yuna had no advisor. She had not asked for one. She stood with her hands at her sides and waited. Velith's advisor spoke first. He painted a picture of a dangerous, unstable human girl who had terrorized her teammates with primitive aggression. He played a slowed-down, distorted clip of Yuna's scream that made it sound monstrous. He cited galactic regulations about hostile behavior in group exercises. He was smooth and professional and completely dishonest. When it was Yuna's turn to speak, she opened her mouth and then closed it again. She did not know what to say. The words felt stuck somewhere deep in her chest. Then the door opened. Dohan walked in first, then Unji. Then, to Yuna's surprise, Sujin, a human girl who had barely spoken to her since they arrived at the academy. Sujin was quiet and careful, the kind of person who watched everything and said nothing. But today, she was carrying a datapad that was full to bursting with files. "We request permission to present evidence," Unji said to the council. Her voice was sharp and clear, and left no room for refusal. The council allowed it. Dohan spoke first. He described what he had witnessed of Velith's treatment of Yuna since the first day. The insults, the shoving, the sabotage. He spoke calmly and clearly, and he did not look at Velith once. Unji spoke next. She gave a technical analysis of the survival footage, the real footage, unedited and complete. She showed every decision Yuna had made and explained why each one was correct. She showed the survival probability calculations. Without Yuna's intervention, the group's chances of surviving the full 72 hours were 11%. Then Sujin stepped forward. She had been quiet all this time, but what she had been doing was far more powerful than speaking. Every insult, every shove, every slur scratched into a dormitory door. She had dates, times, locations, images, and audio recordings. Weeks of evidence, carefully organized and impossible to deny. She placed the datapad on the council's desk and stepped back. The room was very quiet. Instructor Marath spoke last. He had been sitting in the back of the room, and when he rose, even the council members straightened in their seats. He was a senior instructor, respected across the academy, and he had been silent about the human situation for too long. He knew it. His voice was heavy with something that might have been shame. He presented his own analysis of the survival footage. He confirmed Yunji's numbers. He stated, in clear and undeniable terms, that Yuna's actions had saved every member of her group. He said that her behavior was not aggressive, but protective. He said that what Velith called dangerous instinct was, in fact, the highest form of survival competence he had ever observed in a first-year student of any species. The council deliberated for 40 minutes. When they returned, they dismissed Velith's complaint entirely. There would be no expulsion. There would be no discipline. The complaint was baseless. Velith's face did not change, but his hands, hidden beneath the table, were shaking. He was not punished. His connections saw to that. The system bent for him one more time. But the damage was done. Everyone on the station had seen the hearing. Everyone knew what he had tried to do. And everyone had seen Yuna standing there alone, small and quiet and unbroken. That night, Velith found her. She was walking back to her dormitory through a quiet corridor on the lower level. He stepped out of the doorway, with Dren and 2 others behind him. They blocked her path. Veleth's face was tight with a rage that had nowhere to go. He stepped close, too close, and pushed her back against the wall. His hand was on her shoulder, pressing down. "You should leave," he said, "before something happens that the council cannot fix." Yuna looked up at him. She did not flinch. She did not look away. Her voice came out flat and steady, like a blade laid on a table. "You pushed me because you thought I was weak," she said. "You are scared now because you found out I am not. But I still have not shown you what I look like when I stop being kind." She held his gaze for 3 long seconds. Then she reached up, removed his hand from her shoulder, and walked past him without another word. Veleth did not follow her. His hands were trembling, and he could not make them stop. The next morning, a new announcement appeared on the station network. The annual interspecies combat tournament was open for registration. It was the most prestigious competitive event at the Academy, broadcast across the Galactic network, watched by billions. Participation was voluntary. Yuna signed up before breakfast. Dohwan found her in the dining hall and sat down with a worried look. "The combat tournament?" he said. "Yuna, you do not have to prove anything to anyone." She looked at him, and for the first time in weeks, there was something new in her eyes. Not anger, not revenge, something calmer and more dangerous than either. "I am not proving anything," she said. "I am done being quiet." The grand arena of Lior 6 was built to hold 20,000 spectators, and on the day of the interspecies combat tournament, every seat was full. The noise was enormous. Species from dozens of worlds filled the curved rows, their voices and clicks and whistles mixing into a single roar that vibrated through the floor and into Yuna's bones. Hovering camera drones circled the arena like metal birds, broadcasting the event live to hundreds of planets across the galactic network. Yuna stood in the fighter's tunnel beneath the arena floor. The tunnel was cold and lit with blue light that made everything look sharp and unreal. She was wearing the standard combat suit, lightweight armor that covered her torso and limbs but left her hands free. It was designed for her body, and it fit well, but she still looked small in it. She looked small compared to everything. She closed her eyes and breathed. In the stands above, Unji had claimed seats near the front and was leaning forward with her elbows on her knees. Dohwan sat next to her, his leg bouncing nervously. Sujin was beside him with her datapad ready, recording everything as she always did. Teho was further back, arms crossed, watching the arena with the calm expression of someone who had seen enough of the galaxy to know what was coming. Commander Hyok sat in the official observation box, high above the arena floor. He was Earth's military liaison to the Academy, a decorated officer with a face that looked like it had been carved from old wood. He had read Yuna's file that morning. He had read about her survival scores, her background, her training records. He had also read about the bullying, the hearing, and the formal complaint. He did not look worried. He looked like he was waiting. The first match was announced. Yuna's name appeared on the massive display above the arena, alongside her opponent, a coffee brawler named Toruk, same species as Dren. 4 arms, twice her mass, built like a machine designed for breaking things. The audience murmured. A few laughed. The alien commentators made jokes about size differences and survival predictions. One of them called it the shortest match in tournament history. Yuna walked out onto the arena floor. The lights hit her from above, and she squinted for a moment before adjusting. Toruk was already there, rolling his 4 massive shoulders and cracking his knuckles one set at a time. He looked down at her and shook his head like he was disappointed. The signal sounded. Toruk charged. He was fast for his size, and his first swing came with enough force to crack bone. But Yuna was not where the swing landed. She moved sideways, just enough, and his fist passed through the space where her head had been a half second before. She was already inside his reach before he could pull back, and she hit him in the joint of his lower right arm with a precise angled strike that sent a jolt of pain up his shoulder and locked the arm in place. He swung with his upper left. She ducked under it and kicked the inside of his knee. He stumbled. She spun behind him, locked her arm around his neck, and used his own momentum to pull him off balance. When he hit the ground, the arena floor shook. She held him there. He thrashed with 3 working arms, but she had positioned herself perfectly. Every movement he made tightened the lock. His species was stronger, but her leverage was better. And her grip strength, the grip strength of a creature whose ancestors had hung from trees and climbed cliffs with their bare hands, was something his body was not built to break. The referee counted. Toruk tapped out at 3 minutes and 47 seconds. 20,000 spectators sat in their seats and processed what they had just seen. Then the noise came, and it was deafening. Yuna stood up, bowed to her opponent, and walked back to the tunnel. Her face showed nothing. Her hands were steady. Commander Hyuk allowed himself a very small smile. The next 3 matches followed a pattern. Each opponent was bigger, stronger, or more naturally dangerous than the last. A Vesic with armored plates covering her torso and skull. A Renthali with 4 flexible arms, tipped with suction cups strong enough to crush metal. A tall serpentine Drolith with venomous spines along his forearms. Yuna beat them all, not with brute strength, though her strength was far greater than any of them expected from her size. She beat them with technique, with reading, with the accumulated combat knowledge of a species that had been fighting everything, including itself, for its entire existence. She used joint locks, throws, sweeps, and pressure point strikes from martial arts traditions that were older than most galactic civilizations. She adapted to each opponent within the first 10 seconds of each fight, studying their movement, finding their weakness, and attacking it with surgical precision. She also took hits, hard ones. The Vesic caught her with a headbutt that split her eyebrow open and sent blood running down her face. The Renthali grabbed her arm and squeezed hard enough to leave bruises that would last for weeks. The Dralith grazed her shoulder with a venomous spine, and the medics had to treat her between rounds. She got back up every time, every single time, because human pain tolerance was not just high by galactic standards, it was absurd. Humans could break bones and keep fighting. They could lose blood and stay conscious. Their bodies flooded with chemicals, adrenaline and endorphin and cortisol, that turned pain into fuel and fear into focus. It was not courage. It was biology. It was what Earth had built into them, because anything less would have died a million years ago. In the stands, Unji was on her feet, screaming. Dohan had stopped bouncing his leg. He was sitting very still, his eyes locked on Yuna, and his expression was something between pride and fear. Sujin's datapad was forgotten in her lap. Teho was leaning forward now, and he was grinning. The semi-final match was announced, and when the name appeared on the display, the arena buzzed. Yuna versus Dren. Dren walked out slowly. He was the same Coffee who had shoved her in corridors, who had stepped on her datapad, who had made her feel small and powerless for weeks. He was also the same Coffee she had dragged from a toxic bog with her bare hands, while acid burned her skin. He looked at her across the arena floor, and she could see it in his eyes. He was terrified, not of losing, but of her. Of the thing he had pushed and pushed, without understanding what was behind the quiet. The signal sounded. The fight lasted 90 seconds. Yuna did not hurt him. She did not need to. She moved through his defenses like water through cracks, redirecting every swing, collapsing every stance, using his weight and his fear against him with a calmness that was more frightening than any amount of aggression. She put him on the ground 3 times. The third time, She pinned him with a hold across his upper arms and waited. He tapped out. She released him immediately. Then she stood up and held out her hand. Dren lay on his back, breathing hard, staring up at this impossible girl. He looked at her hand for a long time. Then, slowly, he reached up and took it. She pulled him to his feet, nodded once, and walked away. The arena roared. The final match was Yuna against Velith. He had entered the tournament specifically for this. He had been training privately with combat instructors from 3 different worlds. He was tall, fast, and fluid, and the Orani fighting style was elegant and technical, built around speed, reach, and precision strikes to nerve clusters. He was the betting favorite. He was supposed to win. He walked onto the arena floor with his chin held high and his dark eyes burning. Yuna walked out to meet him, and she did not look away. The signal sounded. Velith was good, better than good. His reach was enormous, and his strikes were fast and accurate. He hit Yuna in the ribs with a spinning kick that cracked something inside her, and she staggered sideways, gasping. He followed with a combination of nerve strikes that sent white fire down her left arm. He pressed his advantage, driving her back toward the arena wall with a flurry of attacks that were almost too fast to track. The crowd surged. Velith's supporters screamed their approval. For a moment, it looked like Yuna was done. She hit the wall, her back pressed against the cold surface. Blood from her eyebrow ran into her left eye. Her ribs screamed with every breath. Her left arm hung numb at her side. Velith stepped forward for the finishing blow. Yuna looked up at him, blood on her teeth, one eye half closed, ribs broken, arm useless, and she smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was not a brave smile. It was the smile of something old and deep and absolutely unbreakable, something that had crawled out of the mud of a world that tried to kill it every single day and had said, "Not today, not tomorrow, not ever." Commander Hyuk leaned forward in his seat. His voice was barely a whisper. "There it is. That is the look." Yuna pushed off the wall. What followed was not a fight. It was a lesson. She came at Velith with everything she had. Not rage, not desperation, but focus. Pure, concentrated, Deathworld focus. The kind of focus that a human reaches when every other option has been removed, and the only thing left is forward. She hit him with her good arm, elbow strikes and palm strikes and hooks that targeted the weak points she had been cataloging since the fight began. She matched his speed and then exceeded it, because adrenaline had turned her body into a machine that no longer recognized limits. She absorbed his counter-strikes without slowing down, because pain was just information, and she had already decided it was not relevant. Velith could not match her endurance. His species had never needed endurance. His world had never demanded it. His lungs burned. His arms grew heavy. His elegant technique dissolved into desperate swings that hit nothing. Yuna swept his legs. He hit the floor. She pinned him. He struggled, but she held him with a grip that would not break, the grip of a Deathworld predator that had caught its prey and would not let go. Velith's body went limp. He tapped out. The arena exploded. Yuna stood up. She was covered in bruises and blood. Her left arm still hung at her side. Her ribs ground against each other with every breath. She swayed slightly on her feet. She looked down at Velith. He lay on the floor, staring up at the ceiling, his chest heaving, his face empty. She bowed, a short, respectful bow, the kind you give to someone who fought well. Then she turned and walked away, and 20,000 voices carried her name out into the galaxy. In the observation box, Commander Hyuk stood and watched her go. Somewhere behind him, a senior alien diplomat was watching the same footage on a private screen. He turned to his aide with an expression that was difficult to read. "Remind me," the diplomat said slowly, "how many humans are there on that Deathworld?" The aide checked. 8 billion, Arbiter. The diplomat said nothing for a very long time. He just watched the replay of a small, bleeding girl with a smile on her face. And he thought about what it meant for a galaxy that had spent centuries believing it was safe. The days after the tournament were strange and quiet. Yuna spent the first 2 of them in the medical bay, lying on a bed while alien machines hummed over her body and slowly put her back together. 2 cracked ribs, a fractured wrist, deep tissue bruising across her torso and arms, nerve damage in her left hand from Velith's strikes, and 17 minor cuts and abrasions. The medical staff treated her with a kind of careful fascination, like they were repairing something they did not fully understand. Dowan visited every day. He brought food from the dining hall and sat in the chair beside her bed and talked about nothing in particular, because he knew that was what she needed. He told her about the weather simulation in the station's park level. He told her about a funny argument he had overheard between 2 Pelhari students about the correct temperature for soup. He told her that Onji had been interviewed by 3 galactic news networks and had been terrifyingly articulate in all of them. Yuna listened and smiled and ate her food. She did not ask about the tournament footage or the reactions or the news. She did not need to. She could feel the change in the station the same way she could feel a shift in the weather. Something had moved. When she was released from the medical bay, she walked back to her dormitory and found the corridor quiet. No slurs on her door, no hostile looks. The students she passed either nodded at her or looked away quickly, and she could not tell which reaction was respect and which was fear. She did not want either one. She just wanted to go to class. But the galaxy was not done with her. The tournament footage had gone far beyond the station. It had been broadcast across the galactic network to hundreds of worlds, and the clip of Yuna smiling with blood on her teeth had been viewed more times than any sporting event in the history of the interspecies combat tournament. It had been analyzed, debated, discussed, and feared. Alien commentators called it the most terrifying thing they had ever seen in competition. Not the fighting, not the skill, the smile. The fact that a creature in that much pain could look at its enemy and smile like that. Humans across the galaxy received a strange new kind of respect. Doors opened that had been closed. Conversations started that had been avoided. Diplomats who had ignored Earth's requests suddenly returned their calls. It was not friendship, not yet, but it was a beginning. On the station, the change was more personal. Velith had lost more than the fight. The social structure of the academy had shifted overnight, and the students who had once followed him now avoided him. His Urani friends distanced themselves. His Kathi enforcers found other people to stand behind. He sat alone in the dining hall, at a table in the corner, eating in silence. It was the same table Yuna had used for weeks. Yuna noticed this on her 3rd day back. She stood in the dining hall with her tray and looked at Velith across the room. He was hunched over his food, his tall frame folded in on itself, his dark eyes staring at nothing. He looked smaller than she had ever seen him. She walked over and sat down across from him. He looked up. His expression cycled to surprise, confusion, suspicion, and something that might have been fear. All in the space of 2 seconds. He leaned back in his chair, like he was preparing to be hit. Yuna set her tray down and began eating. "What are you doing?" Velith asked. "Eating," Yuna said. "Why here?" She looked at him. "Because I did not fight you because I hated you," she said. "I fought you because you needed to learn that cruelty does not make you strong. It just makes you lonely." Velith stared at her. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. "Your apology was terrible, by the way," Yuna added. "The one you tried to give me after the hearing. It was clumsy, and it was not enough." "I know," Velith said. His voice was rough, but it was a start. She picked up her fork. So start again, and do better this time. Velith looked at her for a long time. Then something in his face broke, not like glass, but like ice in spring, slowly, and with a sound that was almost like relief. His eyes became bright and wet, and he blinked rapidly and looked down at his food. "I am sorry," he said. The words came out uneven and raw. "For all of it, I am sorry." "I know," Yuna said. "Eat your food. It is getting cold." Across the dining hall, Dohan watched them from his table. Yunji was talking about something, but he was not listening. He was watching Yuna sit with the person who had made her life miserable for months. And he was watching her do it without anger, without conditions, without a trace of the cruelty that had been shown to her. He turned to Yunji and said, "She is the bravest person I have ever met." Yunji followed his gaze and nodded. "She always was," she said. "The rest of the galaxy just did not know it yet." The weeks that followed brought real change. Instructor Morath, who had been silent for too long and knew it, stood before the full academy and formally apologized to the human students. He admitted that he had seen the bullying and had failed to act. He did not make excuses. He proposed a comprehensive anti-harassment policy that would protect students of all species, with real consequences for violations. He submitted it to the Academy Council personally. High Arbiter Selene, the head of the council, approved the policy within a week. Some said she did it because it was the right thing to do. Others said she did it because Earth's political leverage had grown enormously since the tournament broadcast, and rejecting the proposal would have been unwise. Probably, it was both. Tejo nominated Yuna for the Interspecies Leadership Program, a prestigious track that trained students for high-level diplomacy and command roles. It had never accepted a first-year student. It had never accepted a human. The program directors reviewed her file, watched her tournament footage, read the reports from Reth 4, and made their decision in less than a day. Yuna accepted the position quietly. She told Dohwan about it over dinner, and he said he was proud of her, and she told him to stop being sentimental and eat his noodles. Sujin started something of her own. Using the documentation methods she had developed during Yuna's case, she created a student support network for bullied individuals of all species. She trained volunteers to recognize harassment, collect evidence, and support those who were targeted. The network grew fast. Within a month, it had chapters on 3 other galactic stations. Unji published a research paper titled Deathworld Socialization and Conflict Resolution. In it, she examined why humans, a species from one of the most violent worlds in the galaxy, were also one of the most empathetic. She argued that it was not despite the violence, but because of it. Humans had learned, through millions of years of hardship, that survival was not an individual act. It was a community one. They fought fiercely, but they also forgave. They endured terrible things, but they also built hospitals, schools, and shelters for strangers. The paper went viral on the Galactic Academic Network and was cited in over 200 subsequent publications. Commander Hyuk sent his report to Earth through the secure military channel. He had spent weeks writing it, choosing every word carefully. The final paragraph read, "They are beginning to understand what we are, not because we showed them our weapons or our ships or our technology, because one girl, who was hurt and alone and afraid, showed them our heart. She showed them that the most dangerous thing about humanity is not our strength. It is our refusal to become cruel in a universe that gives us every reason to be." Dren changed too, slowly and awkwardly. He was not good with words, but he began showing up to Sujin's support meetings. He stood in the back, with his forearms folded, and said nothing, but he was there. When a younger Kathi student was being harassed by a group of upperclassmen, Dren stepped between them and said, "Stop." He did not explain why. He did not need to. And on the last day of the term, a new group of first-year students arrived at the academy. They came from dozens of worlds, bright-eyed and nervous, carrying their belongings through the entrance hall toward the registration desk. As they walked, they passed a large holographic display that had been installed on the main wall. It showed highlights from the tournament, the top performances, the best moments, the new records. One clip played on a loop, a small human girl with blood on her face, standing over a fallen opponent, bowing with respect, then walking away, steady and sure, while 20,000 voices called her name. A young Urani student, barely old enough to be at the academy, stopped and stared at the display. He turned to an older student standing nearby, a large, scarred Kathi with 4 arms, and asked, "Is it true that the humans come from a Deathworld?" Dren looked down at the young alien and was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "Yes," he said, "and take my advice. Be kind to them, not because they are fragile, because they are not. And because the kind ones, those are the most terrifying of all." The young Orani looked back at the display, at the small girl with blood on her teeth and fire in her eyes, and swallowed hard. Across the station, in a quiet corridor near the park level, Yuna walked to class, with Dowan on her left, and Unji on her right, and Sujin a step behind, all of them talking over each other about something that made Yuna laugh so hard she had to stop and press her hand against her still healing ribs. The light from the station's artificial sun caught her face, and she looked young and ordinary and completely unremarkable. She looked like nothing special at all. And that, the galaxy was learning, was the most dangerous thing about humans.